Gardening almost started as a novelty thing. Like, hey, I see a jasmine plant which grows back home in India. Maybe I should try growing one. Hey, I see a mango plant. Maybe I should try growing one.
Hey guys, welcome to Soul in the Game podcast. This is your host, Soumya. This episode you're going to listen is again dedicated to Earth Month, and I'm talking to one of my favorite Earth heroes, Lavanya Dantuluri. This is a republish of the podcast. We recorded 3 years ago and we had a lot of fun, talked about plants, indoor plants, outdoor plants, how to grow plants in the desert, Arizona. And Lavanya was very kind and generous to share her knowledge and her love for plants. The intention of this podcast is to learn, share, and grow. The curiosity child in me wants to talk to people who are helping and growing our communities, and also at the same time fighting those inner fears. We have great conversation lined up, and I'm very honored to be talking to Lavanya about this very thing she enjoys doing and also sharing. Stay tuned. Let's move right into it. So, Lavanya, you work full time. You have 2 kids, little older kids. You are an art teacher who have more than 30 kids who come to learn art from you. And you have this beautiful garden which you maintain very well and also help people in the group gardening in Chandler answer their questions and save a lot of plants. How did it all start?
Gardening almost started as a novelty thing. Like, hey, I see a jasmine plant which grows back home in India. Maybe I should try growing one. Hey, I see a mango plant. Maybe I should try growing one. I don't think I ever had the perception or the drive to become a gardener, or at least that's not something I planned for. But it started with smaller things, and I think over time I just got hooked to it. Obviously, it was not easy, and we come from a very hostile weather where the summer is 6 to 8 months long, considering the heat sometimes is over 115 degrees for a couple of days, which is very harsh on plants. And then you have plants that survive the heat, do not like the cold, and we have a few days of the freeze, which takes a toll on it. So I think the first few years were always a hit or a miss or a complete loss of killing your plants and your time and everything. But at the end, it always seemed like a little more of learning. Okay, if you have to do this, you need to do it better, in a different mindset and better preparation, things like that. So over time, it became a process of evolving as a, I wouldn't say even a gardener, at least just as a simple house owner, right? You want to just keep a few plants alive. And then I came across 1 or 2 other people who were in the same boat as me, who knew much less than I did. But then we met a third person who was a little more advanced and has done a lot of research and has been successful in some things. So he said, hey, the only way I can get all of us to share these ideas is if we have this small group, at least to begin with, where we can share ideas. Because most people, once they fail, they give up. Whereas the others will try again and again and try to kind of perfect the survival technique for Arizona, what you actually need, what kind of soil, because there are a lot of external things you need to buy and amend your soil, and location wise, how do you plan the sun exposure and things like that. There's a lot that goes into raising plants here. So that's how we started with 5 people in the group. I think now we have around 2,500 people in the gardening group. I will not take any credit saying that I'm an expert. I still think I'm a novice, and I always think every year I learn. Sometimes I feel I've learned, and then I'm like, I think what I learned is also proven false the next year. So it's a constant process of understanding the climate you're in, the microclimate, and also the plants, and the ecosystem and everything. There is a lot to it. So you can never pinpoint gardening all the way just down to that one small factor. There are many small factors that help you with the success or with the failure. So over time, what I realized is once the conversation started, a lot of people who started gardening their garden fresh from scratch, we were able to help them pick plants which were more fruit based rather than purely ornamental, that you spend a lot of water and trimming and all the costs. And trees like peaches, apricots, and a lot of stone fruit do really well in this weather with much less care. So in some sort, somewhere during this whole process, it became a drive or a mission to kind of help people accomplish more edible gardening, to help them this. And how do you minimize usage of water? When the plants go dormant, you really don't need to water these trees. They can stay without water for a couple of months. But when they are in the fruiting and flowering stage, they do need water. So all this has been a learning process from fellow gardeners, and over time, I think this community was all about like a like a closed loop circuit where you constantly learn. And I think now at least we have inspired a lot more people to try growing a lot of fruits and vegetables. Obviously, the produce that comes out of your garden is far more tastier than the ones you buy from store. Although you don't have it year round, I think its nutritional value is far more than the ones you buy from store because of the shelf life, the handling. You're not spraying any wax or any kind of chemicals. And we have been successful without spraying any chemicals on our plants for about 6.5 years. So my overall gardening experience is about 14 years.
14 years, whoa.
I've seen people who will just start, hit the ground running, and they're probably far more successful in doing a lot of things that I fail at. I still fail at a lot of things, and I hope someday I'll be successful. And but still, there are no regrets in this. I mean, it takes a lot of effort. Definitely rewarding, and I think over years of being surrounded by plants, this is one thing I cannot see myself away from. And yes, like I had the outdoor garden, I started bringing plants inside, and I don't know when that became an obsession, but over time, I'm surrounded by plants in almost every room that gets a reasonable amount of sunlight. I do keep plants because I feel we spend so much time indoors, and our eyes need to break away from all the artificial things, and we breathe in a lot of toxins coming from the carpet and a lot of the fire retardant and all these solutions that are sprayed into the house. I think plants are a good way to bring you back that connection with nature. And the simplest way, there are a lot of plants which do not cost much. You can just ask a friend for a cutting and start with it small. So the biggest plant you see here is about 9 years old. Obviously, it covers an entire wall, so it feels like there are many, many plants. And I have a bunch of different varieties of pothos. All it needs is some sunshine, some water and soil, and a little bit of maintenance, and they do fine. So you want to find plants which are good for your climatic conditions and not stress yourself about going for the really exotic ones which are not meant to be in the desert. But I've enjoyed them for years, and I think the others who have come to my house, just like you have started to grow a little bit of fondness towards how much peace they find in the room coming in, just into this place. I think humans were always very deeply connected with nature, and we just kind of broke away from that with all the media and everything, and we think the life is indoors. So this kind of again pulls you in the direction. It's very therapeutic. That's what I feel.
To me, Lavanya, whenever I enter your house, it is like a botanical garden inside a temple with all the calming my sense organs and then telling me to relax and chill, life is good. That's the feeling I get. Moving on to talking about this beautiful indoor plants you have, I want to pick your brain for our listeners about getting overwhelmed because the plant is not growing. Do you ever get overwhelmed when you see that your indoor plant is not growing well? because I only have 22 plants in my whole house, and when it's not doing well or when it's not growing, I get really overwhelmed, stressed out.
So one of the key elements for plants is sunlight. And if you just look around all the plants around you, you will see they're all facing the big window in the room. All of them. To some extent, you see them leaning, or to a very great extent, they're all turned towards the windows. So most of the houses now come with blinds, or the window exposure also makes a lot of difference about how much light gets into the room. So this room has a lot of plants. I think last I counted it was around 30, but it gets east sun, and it does not have any blinds or anything to obstruct the windows. So it gets a good amount of sun during winter and summer. Obviously during winter the days are much shorter, so the plants kind of grow into a stunted phase where they do not seem to put out new growth and things like that. They are in a good survival mode and they're healthy. And as far as the size of the plant and how they grow, there are various factors. They are much like children, right? So one thing is sunlight is the key. The second thing is the kind of soil they are in. So if the soil that you have it in is too tight and does not allow the roots to grow, then the growth on the top is going to be much less. So occasionally, if you think that the plant really isn't doing well, try to carefully move it to a slightly bigger pot, move the roots around. It's called, when you repot, you want to move the soil around the roots so it lets the roots grow better. So it becomes pot bound, right? So it looks, just gently pinch the edges so it can loosen up the roots. So when you do pot it in a new soil, make sure the soil is soft, and it allows don't compact it too hard, because then it starts choking the roots. The roots do breathe too, so you cannot overwhelm the roots with excessive water or by really tight compacting of the roots. So those two being the factors. The third one is water, right? How much water do you give it? So this is a problem with most indoor plants, is people tend to overwater. And yes, some of them do underwater and they'll kill them. And every year even I forget to water them once in a while, and sometimes I end up killing a few plants. But the key is when you stick your hand into the pot, most of the plants like the soil to be moist. In the sense, you can feel the moisture, but it isn't to the point that it sticks a lot to your hand. So it shouldn't be damp. Damp soil always chokes the roots. It causes fungus and things like that, and causes damage to the root. And in the US, the other problem we have is a lot of times we use the softener water, which is tied to the loop of the house. And some of the salts that are used sometimes tend to hinder the plants. So there tends to be. I would just get the regular tap water from outside if you have a softener, or get it from a source that doesn't have a softener. They do much better. I do not have a softener for that reason. I just use the regular tap water. And as far as indoor plant fertilizing, I have never done it so far for past 14 years. So what I do is when I wash my vegetables and rice and lentils, I set aside the water, including the homemade yogurt. I just rinse that and I let it sit. And that's what I give in small portions, like coffee grounds, tea powder, tea leaves, and things like that. This itself has been able to sustain decent amount of growth. And the moment you start adding chemical fertilizers, the soil starts to accumulate a lot more salt. And salt, you start seeing damages in the leaf ends start to brown. Then you would have to repot it. Then it becomes like a cycle. You do it a whole lot more often. So now when the plants grow to a size where I feel the pot is not able to sustain the growth anymore, then I repot them into slightly bigger containers, or I thin out the plants, because some of these actually make new plants if you do it. But then it's an effort to move the bigger ones out because they're heavier and now you don't want to damage the plant. So over years, I've realized you really don't have to do too much. If you just concentrate on the basics of making sure it's getting enough sunlight, the soil is good, and then if the watering is good, most plants will do fine. So there are plants that come from the rainforest, like the bromeliads and things like that, which require a lot of humidity in the atmosphere. Or orchids, they prefer indirect light. All of those are a learning cycle. So first I figured out with the easier plants, the pothos and a few of the indoor plants I started with. And once I thought I had a decent hang of taking care of plants, then I started looking at a little more novelty stuff like orchids and things like that, succulents. And so now a lot of times if I know a friend has a plant that can just, you stick a piece of it and it grows, I just get a piece and I stick it in, and I don't even use rooting hormone most of the time. It's just stick it in the soil and the water, and water it starts to root, and then you plant it. But obviously soil selection is very important. Again, based on where you are and what kind of soil you get, you want to always make use of soil that is well draining, so it doesn't log the water. Or you can mix a few things like perlite and things like that, which keep the water to drain well. Again, cactus needs a slightly different kind of soil. Again, obviously, because cactus is not used to being around a very moist environment, they can grow with, they're more drought tolerant, so you can give them a longer dry spell. So some of these plants, I actually let the soil dry out for a while, and then I give them water.
Okay. Lavanya, let's talk about propagation, right? I have this arrow plant, and one of them, I think you gave it to me 2 years ago, and I have tried propagating pothos and arrow plant in both same ways. I cut those part which has the tiny root type of thing with the stem and stick it in the water for a few days so it starts getting the roots, and once it has a root which is long enough, I put it in the pot and with soil and start growing as always. And there is some transition time where the plant has to get used to growing in the soil from where it was before, that is in the water. So my question to you is, when we propagate, for example, the arrow plant that I got from you, it has very different color. Mine is much lighter green, shades of white, patches on the leaf, and some dark patches, whereas yours is completely dark green leaves, even though it's the same parent plant is from this your parent plant. What's the difference?
It's the amount of light that makes the difference. So I realized if I moved this plant out of the room and put it in a slightly darker room, the leaves didn't show much variation in color. So again, you will see the size of the leaves on the pothos are far bigger where they're close to the light source, and as they go farther away, you see that they're much smaller. And if you see, there are even strands of things where there is no leaves, because obviously it's not getting any sunlight. So you learn a lot just by looking at how amazing nature is. It knows how to maximize the resources in the given room. Yeah. Obviously, if you constantly trim it, the leaves will be much lusher, but I just let it grow.
I love it. I love the natural way how it's grown. It is like a beautiful green forest within your own house, and you get to enjoy it all the time without going to a real forest. Let's move to outdoors from indoors now. Your garden, even during the peak of summer, is lush green and blooming with life. I'm curious to know how long you've been in Arizona and how you've been able to maintain such beautiful greenery in your outdoors.
Yeah, I've lived in Arizona for about 18 years now. And yeah, the garden is only 6 6 to 6.5 years old. So this was our first build it from scratch project, the front and the backyard. So what we realized in Arizona is if you have to constantly are in the battle with nature, you have to make nature work for you. We started learning from people how they build microclimates. That is where you take a piece of your yard based on whatever exposure it is. You start tucking in the resilient trees first. You get them into the ground. Once they're established, then you go for the ones which are not as resilient and they need protection. Instead of constantly working on putting shade cloths and things like that, you make the trees help you raise the other trees. So like a simple example, you're seeing out of this window is a Nicanthus arbotritis, also known as the parijata. It's a jasmine variety. So this is the east side of the house. So we got the plant when it had only 5 leaves. Oh. Literally 5 leaves. It's huge now and it's 4 years old. So the very first thing is, again, you're constantly battling with the elements. So this side of the yard didn't have much protection apart from the house itself giving it the shade. So for the first few months, I actually put a chair on top of it to give it the shade from the mid-afternoon. And, around 10 o'clock, it gets really hot. And the plants start to get cooked in the heat. So try to look for simpler solutions for protecting your plant when they're really vulnerable at that age. So once it took off and the roots got established, it grew really well in this direction. And during winters, the house actually gives it enough amount of the heat that escapes from the walls and windows, and it keeps the plant warm. So I think the first winter we protected it during the freeze, but after that it has been on its own. So once we got the parijata in and it's been established, I have tucked in a lot of plants under it, which do not like the heat, but they'll take the filtered sun. So I have a lot of mums, chrysanthemums that have been surviving for many years now. And then we have put the new loquat trio there. It's about 2 years old now. It's thriving. It hates the heat. So it provides it a full protection against the wind and the heat and the cold. And then I have tucked in a lot of new plumerias that have gone closer to the home now. And I've tucked in a few lavenders under it. So maybe another 2 years or 3 years, this area is going to look a lot more greener than it already is. So building these microclimates, you'll be surprised. After a while, you cannot tell which leaf belongs to which tree. They just figure out a way to coexist. And we realized that the closer the plants were, they were doing much better during summer and winter. But initially, this was not the case. When the plants were really in their nascent phase, we had them around 6 to 8 feet apart because that's what we thought. Okay, trees need to have a big space to grow and the canopy grows and things like that. Then we realized they were getting beaten, the harsh afternoon sun, and the winters were harsher. So then we started tucking in. The first layer of plants got established for 2 years. Then we start tucking in trees under it. So there are trees behind trees behind trees, and now there are trees everywhere. But they're doing really well, and they look lush green, and there's so much life in the backyard. And once you start letting nature take over, you will be surprised how many more creatures it invites to your garden. And they find it automatically very safe because it's like a good place to nest. And then there's also a good place for them to find good food. So they can just go for the fruit on the trees. And we have fruit all around the year, one variety or the other. So we have grapes growing in this desert. We have a lot of jujubes. We have apricots, peaches. There's a huge variety of fruits that grow, figs and apples. They may not be all varieties of apples. We have selective varieties of apples that do well for the desert. Obviously, that also includes in your research part of seeing what actually grows well in your locality.
So, Lavanya, are you and your husband both into gardening?
He was mostly into gardening and he was the one who did all the research. But then I kind of, I'm like the caretaker. I don't do much research. So my job essentially is much like a mother. I'm just making sure they're all fine, they've all eaten, and they're getting their rest. You know, just as I think I'm just like a plant mom. Technically, at the end of the day, I just make sure they're healthy. That's about it. And to a great extent, I really am not somebody who will sit down and research about a plant. I somehow feel I'm learning just as I spend time with them.
You know, there's even a word for that, and it's called experiential learner.
Oh, is it? Okay, that's me then. Yeah, I'm very hands-on person. So you can talk to me about a plant and give me its genus, species, and its origin. Makes no sense to me. I'm like, hey, give me the plant. I'll figure it out, you know. So, yeah, and like a lot of these plants, he would tell me, hey, this comes from the forests of India, or this is a kind of Hoya, and you just need to find your interest, right? What is it that interests you? There are people who enjoy novelty gardening, right? So where they like to grow things which look beautiful and they're beautifully manicured. I mean, there is every possible way for you to do your garden, right? There are people who enjoy ponds in the garden. Definitely go ahead putting a pond, add some koi fish and water lilies. It isn't necessarily that only if you grew trees, you're a gardener, or if you grew vegetables, you're a gardener. I think there's just a whole lot to experience in this, right? And like I like a lot of flowering plants too. Not that I like plucking flowers or making vases. I'm just so surprised that once you have a few flowering plants, the amount of bees that visit your garden, the hummingbirds that visit your garden. And I felt we are already in an ecosystem where a lot of the trees and flowers and everything is so manicured and so trimmed. There are times I feel during winter the hummingbirds have no flowers, so you need to put out feeders for them. So I try to grow things more naturally so they have some sort of food source. So as a result of which, I always have hummingbird babies in my yard, and I get to watch it from the beginning to the end, and it's a wonderful experience. And honestly, like I said, I never prepared myself as a human being growing up thinking one day I'll be a gardener and this will be my goal. And I think it's a slow addiction towards where I've gotten, but definitely something that's good to lose your soul to, right? And it really lends you a lot of emotional support, and to understand that we always come from nature, right? And then we go back to the nature. All these struggles in between are just temporary, you know? Everything moves on with you, without you. It'll just go on.
Lavanya, earlier you mentioned about having fish or in a pond in the backyard. I'm curious, do you have any fish in your backyard now?
So we have a bunch of goldfish in our backyard. They're doing fine. They actually had babies this COVID time. So you don't have to spend a lot of money to enjoy these small little things. So we made a few water features in the garden. So initially, when I started the gardening group and things like that, I had seen other gardeners put out small bowls of water and things like that for the birds and bees during summer. Then I thought, hey, if water is so important for all the other creatures, why not we have a setup which actually has an aesthetic purpose and also helps creatures, right? So then we started with my husband got water lily plants on eBay. You know, they deliver water lily on by post. So we bought a concrete container and we grew it. It grew beautifully. Then we realized that there was a lot of life around that pot during mid-afternoons because it was hot. So all the birds that were taking refuge in the trees around had a place to drink water. And then we started noticing that the number of birds that were visiting our garden had increased because now they know there's a source of food and there's a source of water. Yes, they do eat fruit. That's fine. They also take care of a lot of pests, you know, in the lawn and a lot of things. So over time, what we realized is these water features, we expanded them to a few more. So we have a lot of hummingbirds. You can see one as we speak. And then we have, yeah, and then we have a lot of grackles. We even saw California orioles once, that came as a pair. And we have a cactus wren. We have some doves, sparrows, a lot of finches. There's a whole lot of variety of birds. I don't even know their names too. They come here for the fruit. They have babies. There's a roadrunner that runs around, and there's a lot of lizards. So we try not to do any sort of pest control also, because we realize that it starts interfering with the health of these creatures. So for the most part, we have not done any chemical treatment for any of the plants or trees. We compost all the vegetable scraps. We do our own yard maintenance, which means we collect all the leaves, shred the twigs, and then we mulch it. So all the heavy duty work my husband does, and I take care of the day-to-day, checking on the plant's welfare and then making sure the seeds go in on time. And a lot of it is we want to keep a very organic way of gardening, even in terms of the visuals. We do not overly trim our trees. We pretty much leave it like nature intended it, except for the places where we feel it's overwhelming, the pool or something else, and we're like, hey, okay, it needs a little bit of a trim. But for the most part, we let it stay, and that actually helps the birds actually nest better, because it gives them more protection from the other creatures. So they're really well hidden. So you'll find a lot of nests in the trees, and during spring you'll be surprised to see how many babies. We wouldn't even know that they're there. They're just so it's beautiful. And then we've started seeing a lot of butterflies that come to the garden for the flowers, and obviously the pollinators. So we tuck in a lot of novelty stuff along with fruits and vegetables, and a lot of evergreen stuff, just so it is pleasing to the eye.
Okay, Lavanya, let's change the gears a little bit now and get to know Lavanya more. So, this is a true or false answer, and I would say Lavanya is very patient, true. Is that correct?
Yes, patience definitely. One thing being a mom, the other thing being an art teacher for about 9 years, and I have worked with a lot of young children. It's amazing how children, right, and plants for that matter, you can't really get them to conform to you. They won't, unless they want to, right? So it's tricky, right? Sometimes you have to be tough with them, but sometimes you have to listen. Sometimes, yes, you have ground rules, and then sometimes you have to give in to their whatever the demands or whatever is, and you have to accept them as they are. Like some plants will refuse to grow no matter what you do. Still love you, right? Yes, and the same thing. I have had a lot of plants for years that probably just had two leaves. I don't think there was a day during the years when I thought, hey, I'm just tired of this plant, I'll yank it out. People will usually say, hey, it doesn't do anything for me, I'll yank it out. I'm like, give it time, maybe it needs more time, And yes, in my own experience, something like that, I had a plant for many years which had like one leaf, and then it had two leaves. I think after 4 years, it had a flower. I just sat there and I was like, thank you. You proved me I wasn't wrong. So, yes, as a child, I was never patient. I don't think even today I'm that patient, but yes, I have learned a lot of patience from gardening, because you cannot rush into doing anything. It will take a certain amount of time. Initially, I would sow a seed, and then I would like, hey, there's no seedling yet. Or then you have to give it its time. It'll come when the weather is right. Because a lot of times when your seasons change so much, so the temperature of the soil has to be right for the seeds to sprout. And all this is a learning experience. You can do a lot of grow lights and this and that, but your patience is actually tested by nature. And if you want to persevere, the only way is to be calm and ride the wave, right?
All right, Lavanya, we have officially come to the end of this amazing conversation about gardening, and I'm very, very thankful to you for sharing so many detailed information and having this meaningful conversation, especially during social distancing, lockdown time, which makes a lot of difference. Having this quality time to talk and share some insights is very valuable. So I really appreciate that. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah, definitely. I would tell people try to stay in connect with nature. Grow a small plant. You'll be surprised how far we have gotten away from the nature connection. An indoor plant is one small way to get back to that. I don't say you should grow an indoor garden, greenhouse, or whatever. Start small. If you always had the doubt about gardening and if it is for you, believe me, it is far better than any kind of therapy or anything that you can imagine. It helps you find your focus. It helps you find your, people say meditation is the way. This is also a sort of meditation. It's happiness. It's joy, and you can enjoy it with your eyes open. So obviously it brings you back close to the ground and retaining all the values of nature, because we need to provide this platform for our children for healthier generations coming. So try to use far less herbicides or whatever kind of pesticides you're using. Try to go for more organic ways of controlling these. If you need to pull the weeds out, hey, spend some time outside and yank them out rather than putting herbicides, because all this ends up in our water system. And over years of this kind of abuse has already caused a lot of damage. I think we need to stop it, or rather be even more careful about how much we use. Obviously, it's not going to be easy to get away from it, but give it a try. And I think you will begin to appreciate what nature can do for you. Nature doesn't need you, but I think the amount of intervention we have created, now we have to stop, at least reduce the impact of it if you can. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lavanya, for taking time to give our listeners this golden nuggets of information regarding both indoor and outdoor gardening in the desert of Arizona. Listeners, thank you for listening, and I hope this episode brought a lot of inspiration for you to grow your own plants, have some life inside your house or outside your house. If you have any comments, questions, feedback, please feel free to reach out to me, and look forward to coming up more engaging, inspiring conversations with many of the people who are doing what they enjoy doing. And take care. Bye-bye.